In terms of further enhancing it?
Yeah, and using that as part of the yard.
Well, the split rail fences will remain as a barrier, visual and otherwise. If somebody was extremely keen in the category of Gary Oaks, I suppose the strata perhaps could further engage somebody like Jeremy Jai to see if their actions were appropriate, if they were in keeping with the guidelines that were established originally from Jeremy Jai, things like that.
Okay, and then I just wanted to comment on Councillor Haynes' comment. It's definitely in the report many places about the size of it, but it's not in the recommendation.
Right.
So it's not, it isn't right there, and I've learned over the 10 years here, if it's not in the recommendation, we can talk about all we want, it doesn't happen. So we need to have the recommendation. It's taken me 10 years to figure that out. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions from councillors, but I have a couple myself. If this does go through and is built, would the applicant consider making the home solar ready, which is, as you probably know, simply a matter of putting conduits in at the time of building. It's not expensive, it just allows for easy wiring or whatever needs to go in the future.
I don't know whether the family wants to nod yea or nay to that. It kind of looks like possibly not.
Well, perhaps it could be considered as to whether, if this goes to public hearing, whether that would be the case.
Sure, I'll make a note of that.
I'll just indicate that the world in terms of solar is right now changing extremely rapidly, and I expect by the time these houses were built, it would almost be an expectation.
Sure.
So
perhaps
something worth considering.
Sure. Perhaps between now and public hearing, we'll discuss it further with our building designer and have our
sure. It's not a high-cost item if done at the time.
I understand.
And just in terms of the discussion that happened before your presentation, there was the issue of whether or not there would be a willingness to have a pedestrian registered right-of-way on the Strata Street. Do you know if that's been answered yet?
It has been, yeah, and it will be.
It will be there,
yeah.
So there's agreement there.
Yeah, it's actually was originally dealt with through the former director of engineering, and it was a requirement to have a pedestrian link from Linfield Crescent through our property, which would give direct access then down the hill to the Galloping Goose Trail, or the other direction to shopping on the Shelburne area.
Thank you for that. And the last one, there were some questions about parking from council at the first time, and I think probably we all appreciate the attempts to preserve trees, and I agree that that is a primary concern. Has there been any resolution to that, or would it be more in the later design details?
No, it's certainly, I was actually a bit surprised that it came up as an item of discussion. We've worked quite closely with engineering literally for 5 years now. It has always been a 10-meter wide right-of-way, a 6-meter wide drive aisle, 2-meter on either side for vehicle parking. We've got quite a few vehicle parking lay-bys on either side of the aisle. And as the Director of Planning pointed out, it was primarily to work around the Gary Oaks. And that's the reason also why the roadway itself meanders a little bit. And that was always sort of part of the plan right from day one.
That was my understanding. I read it as 10 meters and not 6, and
that's
so
right.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, and the curbs are mountable on either side, so in the event of emergency vehicle, it doesn't have to go over a non-mountable curb.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Oh, Mayor Atwell has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Something that you said earlier, just recently, that piqued my interest. I wanted to ask through you to our staff what incentives we offer or provide in any fashion for applicants to put solar panels on homes.
I refer that to staff, but by the best of my knowledge, there aren't any at this time.
Currently, there aren't any incentives. We are looking at that and would bring it back to council as sort of a suite of environmental initiatives that could be looked at as part of single-family dwellings and multiple.
Thank you. Will that come this year?
I would anticipate that single-family dwellings would be possible to bring forward this year because we are looking at the conditions around opting in for additional solar requirements as part of building code. So I could see it bringing forward single-family this year. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tenney.
Thank you, Walter.
If there are any questions, I'll ask you to come back.
Sure. Just on that topic of incentives, I forgot to mention one fairly significant incentive that's different from the regional applications is there's a $100,000 cash contribution, which is noted in your agenda package, directed towards upgrades for Mount Doug Park, working in conjunction with the Gordon Head Residents Association and Sandwich Parks. So that's a significant feature that is different than the previous two applications.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'll now call on any members of the public who wish to make a presentation to council. Please come forward. And please give your name and address.
My name is Ray Gailey. I live at 2210 McCoy, and my fellow farmers call me Mach 1. I prefer to be called Mach 1. I'm here to support the Alberts because, as a farmer, that area is done as far as agriculture. It should have been done 5 years ago. What the Alberts had to go through to accomplish this, it annoys me. But now, Gord, peace will come. The only thing I'm concerned about is what you talked about earlier, affordable housing. Great project, but it should be 8 stories up in the air. You're going to have to go over there, make better use of the land like this does come available. I agree with this. If something else comes up, you've got to start talking higher density. If you had higher density in Sandwich 40 years ago, imagine most of the farmland is still being going ahead.
Could you move closer to the mic? Otherwise, people
So we have to
won't
make
hear.
changes. The only one thing I'm concerned about through the engineering department, where's the stormwater retention? As a farmer, I'm concerned about that. Not for this project. I'm concerned about all the other projects that have been up there. Where's it go? Does it flow uphill or downhill?
I'll make a note of that and get an answer for you at the end of public input.
It's very important when it comes to agriculture, especially if you're not going to clean ditches up. But as I say, Gord, I went through this 35 years ago. 35 years ago, all the land around us, I still be part of it. If all the land around had snuck out of here when it was in, we would never move. I don't want the fact that in 2007, you council members unanimously voted to bring the cul-de-sac in, not against the rest.
Could you address the
What I'm trying to say, you got to have, if you're going to bring on top of the airline, you've got to start buffering it back. Any other place that comes up like this in the future, you can't bring development right on a piece of the other land, because the soil is no different one side of the fence than the other. That's all I'm going to say. Right, Patrick?
Thank you very much.
I've been asleep for 2 days, and now I got to go back and fix the data line and take it 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. For good fees, fair ways, quality foods.
Thank you. Other members of the public?
Mr. Chairman, Mayor, Council, my name is Robert Boyd. I live at 4173 Linfield Crescent, which is right at the end of Linfield Crescent, right next to the panhandle of the property we're discussing. At every hearing before this council, either in written form or in person, I've spoken in support of what the Alberts have been trying to do with this land. I think many of you have been to the area. You maybe walked along a little bit of Linfield Crescent and Mercer, and you've seen their property. I see these as each piece of a beautiful little community. And I think you could walk along Linfield from Cedar Glen up to where the Albert property is and not think this is a pretty special piece of Saanich or the world. And Mercer's, you know, it's got its two sides. There were some covenants set aside there. But those covenants that were set aside there, I believe that the strength of the commitment of the Albergs to what they want to preserve on their piece of property is even stronger than what was set aside on the newest development on Mercer. when my wife and I looked at the first proposal, which is very similar to what we're looking at now, pretty much identical, we looked at the size, the fact that the lots are a little bit bigger and the footprint of the houses are a little bit smaller than what we've seen in other areas, including on Mercer. We thought that this looks quite nice. Part of the development of Mercer involved a public pathway beside our property. We weren't very happy about that. But we've seen that what that allows not only ourselves but our neighbors to do is walk through these communities. There's a loop that you can do down Linfield, Winchester, Glendenning, and back along Mercer. And what's proposed here just adds to that. So I see that this is not, well, I really see it as a completion of our neighborhood. And I think it's really worthy of support. One of the things that happened as a result of the neighbors not being very happy about the cattle feed lot, and there's certainly things about that we didn't like, although my 6-year-old granddaughter certainly misses the cows, but there was a petition of around 300 signatures, and I canvassed the whole length of Linfield, and I didn't get anything but support in terms of this being another, a very nice, very well thought out addition to our neighborhood. And so I would hope that based on the merits of what the Alberg family have put together with their consultants, that you would support this. And I would like to say that I have found the Albergs to be quite wonderful neighbors. I know it's been difficult for many people, but I think they're really good people, and I think they have their heart in this in a way that would never be the case if they were to sell this land and it was to be developed by someone who's looking at it simply for the economic gain that could be derived from it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address council?
Mark Fukubrad, 4117 Mercer Place. I'd really like to thank Councillor Haynes for his great work in bringing this initiative forward. I'd also like to thank Council for actually changing their practice to allow this to come forward. It's very much appreciated. Our neighborhood has been looking forward to this day for a very, very long time. I would like to reiterate a couple of things that Rob has just said. You know, I also canvassed in our neighborhood, and the absolute vast majority of people support the 16-lot subdivision that is before you today. I have some friends that are in the planning business, and they tell me that this is the nicest subdivision that's been before Saanich in a very, very long time. Fits in beautifully with our neighborhood. If for some reason you folks feel that it doesn't fit in our neighborhood, there's a significant possibility that this could go back to cows. And I want to make a few comments about that. This would be an absolute travesty for our neighborhood. We have had such a trial with this thing, trying to move forward with what we feel is a very lovely development. And I know there's a lot of people that are very, would be very upset at the prospect. I don't see this as some members of council may. This is not, in my view, a threat. These people, the Albergs, are a cattle people. They have invested significant amounts of money in infrastructure. And if they don't get approval for this, they're probably, for a period of time at least, are going to go back to doing cattle. Disastrous for our neighborhood. And again, I said this at the last meeting, the declaration for the right to a healthy environment that was brought forward by Councillor Bryce. You folks, I tell you, we've had to put up with a hell of a lot in the last 2.5 years. Even as early as last weekend, with the cows gone, there's still a manure pile out there. And my wife was not able to sit out in our backyard because there were those flies. You know those flies that like to congregate? They were all over her in our backyard. And she said, I can't sit out here. I mean, a simple thing, but you know, there's so many other issues that if you don't approve this, is going to bring onto our neighborhood. And you know, there's many health issues. There's kids that can't play out in their backyards if this is not approved. There's fecal runoff. There's fecal dust flying around. There are people that can't even leave their windows open. It's horrific. And we really, really need to have you folks do what's right for our neighborhood, basically. That's what we need. And if you care about our neighborhood, you're going to approve this thing because it is the best thing that you could do for our neighborhood and for your constituents. So I would absolutely urge you folks to move forward with this so that we can get a lovely development, and we can also allow our neighborhood to heal and move forward. So we would very much appreciate all of your support of this lovely development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before I ask any other members of the public to come forward, I need a motion from council to extend the meeting past 11 o'clock. Councillor Plant? Seconded by Councillor Haynes. All in favor? Opposed? If any, none opposed, motion carries. Any other member of the public would like to come forward, please?
My name is Laura Lee. I live at 1513 Cedar Glen Road, one property removed from the Alberta property. I noted that there was a lot of discussion amongst you about the Gary oak trees and questions of the arborist and concerns about the condition of the trees, future condition of the trees. And I just want to further add to what Mark Buchabrat said, that this would not only be good for our neighborhood, it would be good for those trees. And I think this development encourages retention of many of those trees and planting of new trees. I could see another developer mowing a lot of them down. I think this is the best you're going to get. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Grant Stark. I live at 1515 Cedar Glen Road. I also wish to support the Alberta application. I think it's a reasonable application. It's not practical for this property to continue to be farmed. Our property, Kita Corners, the Alberta property, I have a series of rat traps out. Every morning I go and check my trap line, and I've caught hundreds of rats over the last year and a half. I don't think it's fair for the neighborhood to continue to be subjected to that sort of environment. I also credit the Allbergs for putting $100,000 towards Mount Douglas Park and to assist in the trail system. Overall, I think it's a viable and reasonable alternative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, councillors, Mayor Atwell, fellow citizens. I'm Ray Travers. I live at 1709 Carnegie Crescent, and I am wearing the hat this evening of the President of the Gordon Head Residents Association. Our role here is to represent the citizens and work for better neighborhoods. I won't add anything more to what you've already been told so eloquently by so many of the people who live in this neighborhood. I'd just simply like to add, I know the hour is late, that the Gordon Head Residents Association in March 2014 and then in November of 2014 has recommended to Council that you act in accordance with the existing Gordon Head local area plan which has been in place since 1997. And as long as this new application is consistent with the policies of the Gordon Head Local Area Plan, we will support removal from the Agricultural Land Reserve, rezoning and subdivision. I urge you to move this to the next step in this process. Good evening.
Thank you.
Chair, Mayor, Council, my name is Ted Lee. I live at 1513 Cedar Glen Road. Very strong supporter of this proposal, and one of the biggest parts I like is the covenants that are on it that will have microecosystems return to the property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the public that would like to make their views known to council? Seeing no one, we have one question that was raised. I'll ask the engineer or planning, whoever finds it appropriate. Mr. Gailey had questions about the stormwater treatment.
Yes, through the chair. The question is about drainage, and actually the site straddles two different areas, so they're part of a type 1 and type 2 watershed. Primarily the type 1 watershed, where the drainage comes down to the Lincoln Valley and then subsequently to the Colquitt's watershed. The other part, which I believe there's two properties that go on to, it's Mount Doug Creek through Linfield Crescent.
Yeah, I think Mr. Gailey was also questioning about what kind of measures would be taken. It's my understanding that that would be fleshed out more fully in the future, but perhaps you could comment on that.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. There's also, as part of the report, they do have a rainwater management statement, so they do talk a bit about what some of the detention systems would be like. Ultimately, they have to conform to the Schedule H Type 1 and Type 2 requirements that have specific requirements they need to meet, and they've given us some examples here on page 121.
Thank you very much. Any questions of council? Any further questions? Now, just before I turn this over to council, Madam Clerk, you could correct what I say if it's an error. There are essentially two issues that council has to deal with here. The first one, I believe, the one that should first be handled, is whether or not this proposal should be advanced to public hearing. Secondly, after that is dealt with, then the issue is, and I would introduce it as a separate issue after decision on the first one, if it is to go to public hearing. The issue is then, at what point does the applicant or council, whomever, make application to the ALC to have it removed before the process is complete. Obviously, that has to happen at some point before the process is complete. But at first, we are dealing with the issue of whether or not to send this to public hearing, so I will turn that over to council.
I'd like to move that we send this to public hearing as recommended by our Chief Administrative Officer and planning staff. If there's a seconder, I'll talk to that.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Haynes and then Councillor Plant.
I'm privileged to be here today with a council that decided to make a one-time deviation from their practice, to allow this community to come forward, to allow this applicant to come forward with their presentation. We've heard today the quality of this presentation is excellent, perhaps sensational. I have not enough experience to use those words yet, but from the presentations and words used today, it's clearly a very advanced proposal for what would complete this community. Separate to that, I'd like to appreciate how the community has worked together and the family has respected council. They've removed the cattle. They've put a lot of effort into bringing forward a very excellent proposal. Our staff have analysed it and reported in great detail, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues on this. And I'd like to thank them again for bringing this opportunity forward.
Thank you. Councillor Plant.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief given the time tonight, but just so you know where I stand at, colleagues, I'll say why I am speaking in favor of this. Number one, I think it's integral that council respects local area plans, and it's in there. Number one, done. Number two, farmland's been taken away all around it. It's not viable farmland anymore, folks. The agrologist report, if I said that correctly, it indicated to us that it was essentially potential for hobby farming and not much more than that, and that's unfortunate. I think the real nub of this, when we look at this, is the decisions of previous councils, as well intentioned as they were, to allow this to build up around it, so that this was all that was left. That, in my mind, is what we need to look at. And we are left with trying to deal with the situation as it exists now. And we're trying to reconcile with the fact that we probably did it poorly as a municipality, and we're trying to now solve it. So for me, I am in favor of it because, as I said at the meeting a couple months ago now, last time, this community needs to heal. We've heard tonight overwhelming support. The only thing I will say is I think we as a council need to somehow firm up a policy of if land is being considered to come out of the ALR, that we have some mechanism to do a swap for it to go in. And I know that's going to be cumbersome on potential developers, and I can kind of live with the Panama Flats having gone in the last council, and that's, I tip my hat to them. But for me, we have to clean this up, and this is the right step forward to do that.
Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly support this going forward to public hearing. I think given that we supported it coming to committee of the whole, it would have only been if there had something come forward tonight that we hadn't known or was out of order, that there would be some reason to not go to public hearing. So I certainly support it and look forward to what the general public has to say.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders and Councillor Burke.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Derman. I'm going to, Mr. Derman. It's late.
Well, that's true.
I could call him the other Vic, but I won't do that. So, Councillor Derman. I'm pleased to send this forward to public hearing so we have the greater public come out and speak to it. But I will talk just on a personal level, living on a strata road that's basically the same, 15 houses, and some of the people on this team also were part of the developer that worked that site. And I want to point out that you can't compare the road access to Mercer Place because it is 16 feet narrower. And the issue that we have with our 15 neighbors is traffic. And we have the no parking on the side of the road, but only cars can just pass there. If somebody decides to park on the other side, is single file, you can't get through. So that, this is an issue that happens on strata roads. If you back out of your driveway, you've got to be careful you don't back into the house across the road's driveway, particularly the sidewalk, these driveways line up. This isn't a neighborhood that has a street that you can spill out onto and park on the neighboring road, as Mount Douglas Crossroads doesn't have that ability. So there's a caution that there could definitely be a parking issue, especially with 1.5 parking spaces per property home. When the property I live in was developed, the community association worked well with the developer, and there is actually 5 parking spaces per household. And they're full. And there's also a 6 space in the cul-de-sac for visiting parking, and it's often full, as well as down the road. And so this is going to be a car-centric development, and I don't want to be doom and gloom, but be aware that there will possibly be parking issues. Also, as far as the building scheme, there was a building scheme also went through the process, and people didn't follow it, and 10 years later they don't even know it exists. The detention systems had a great impact on field trees. So those are just comments. It's once people buy there, I'm not sure I'd want to have the house that has the parking bay in front. There's a number of them. And the statement was made, this will only be the nicest subdivision, this will be the nicest subdivision in the community, but it will only be the nicest subdivision if the size is covenanted 232 square meters. Don't let that one slip through the cracks, because that's a difference of, for it's 232 rather than 435 that would be allowed. And for those of us that visualize better in imperial measurement, that's a difference between 2,500 square feet and 4,500 square feet. So square feet, and there's the garage size on top of that. So, you know, that is really important, that that covenant on the house size has to be part of it, spelled out not just by size, but by the actual 232 square meters in this building scheme, in the covenant, wherever we do the recommendations. And that's what I'll be looking for when this comes back to public hearing, not just, oh, the approving office will look at it. It needs to be spelled out so that the neighborhood gets the best subdivision that they can see in this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Worthy.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to thank the community and the neighbors for coming out and persisting week after week and month after month, and in this case year after year. But I appreciate the support you have taken. The part that concerns me about it has nothing to do with the applicant, but when I look at the natural state covenant, I believe in preserving trees. But when I look at what we have here, not only the trees are we preserving, but we are preserving the understories too. And when you look at the future owners here of these properties, I don't believe it's going to be a real sales pitch to tell the owner that half their yard is going to be fenced off and they can't go into it. And it creates a problem. And coming back to the ADPA that we've been looking at, the neighbors have been concerned. When I look at something like this, I see where the neighbors have reason to be concerned. And I think sometimes maybe we can go a little too far. And like I say, I'm for preserving, but I think we have to leave something for the owner to enjoy also. I can relate to the gentleman who spoke about the rats. We happen to live next to a treat area which is up for rezoning. And so far it's cost me $7,000 in wiring for my truck. So I can relate to that